Hello, welcome to Darkest Hour Leveling. My name is Theel, and here is how to set up ladders. So ladders are very touchy. uh, they I think it's very important to try to be as consistent as possible so a player can have a guaranteed experience climbing up or down a ladder. So what I would advise is actually to not use ladder strafing. I used to think ladder strafing was better because, well, I mean it's kind of it's better to allow the player to kind of like move around on the ladder a little bit, right? But there's this glitch that happens when you're climbing a ladder with strafing, and if you get on the edge of the ladder somehow, like on the side of the ladder, which can happen sort of, it will glitch the player out and send them flying either down into the ground or up into the ceiling, and they'll die. Pretty much 100% of the time. Um, However, another reason why I don't recommend ladder strafing is even if you've set up a ladder like this to be very narrow and not to the edges, um, it's not intuitive to the player where the edge of the ladder is, and so they could be climbing up, strafe over a little bit accidentally or just whatever, and feel like they should still be on the ladder but suddenly they fall to their death or whatever. So it's better to just say, "Hey, you're climbing this ladder," and force them to climb the ladder where you want them to climb it, and then now the problem with uh, the current setup here is it's difficult to get the player to go back down the ladder uh, without being on the edges of or off the edges of the volume here. So what I've done here is I've set up some blocking volumes to stop the player from touching these like this lip against the wall, so they can't like get in this corner back here. Um, and another example um, I'll show later, I don't have to do that because it's not in a corner and it's not weird positioning like this. But the reason why I've positioned this ladder like this is um, I don't think it works well to have a ladder go up against a wall and then you have to go over. I mean, it does work, it's possible, but I don't think it works that well, and so this is how I've done this ladder. But anyways, so how a ladder works is you create a volume by using the builder brush tool, which hopefully you know what that is and how to use it. And then you right click here and you find ladder volume, and once you add it, you can edit it using the vertex edit. So it's just like a volume, and then in the properties is the important part. Under ladder volume, here's where you can set up the strafing. So you can see here, this is false. Auto path is true, and what that does is whenever you build, it will generate these pathing tools, which is actually important, but I don't really ever edit them, so I just let it auto generate them and make sure I have my volume correctly positioned. Now, the animation stuff does not work, so just leave that none. The no physical ladder thing, I pretty much always leave this to false because I usually have a physical ladder, or I've never really actually set that to true and see what happens. But I imagine it makes it so the volume is like anytime you're in the volume, you're climbing, is what I imagine that doing, which I think will be very bad and confusing to the player. Alright, so now the most important thing is the wall direction, and this is the most important thing. And this is what makes ladders really annoying, because if you rotate the volume, if you reposition the volume, say I rotated this church, moved this church and rotated it or whatever, duplicated it, whatever, the whenever I rotate the volume or what the building or whatever, it does not change the wall directions, so the ladder will stop working if it is rotating. So you have to go after you duplicate a building or rotate a ladder volume. You have to come back in here and set up the wall direction. Now, if you don't understand what to type in, it's actually quite simple. I usually go in the top-down view, and 0 is always east. If we're dealing with the yaw, by the way, 0 is always east. 32,768 is always west. And then you go in increments of 16,384, I think is south, and then negative 16,384 is north. So you could also do 16,384 plus 32,768 to go north, but to me that's I keep it in simple. Now, if your building is rotated at a non 90-degree angle, there's several things you can do. One, you can kind of just keep fiddling with these numbers until you get the right thing. But one thing I like to do, depending on what you're using as your ladder, for here, I have this static ladder. Where is this at? It's in Detail SM Outdoor Ladder, and this static is handy, sort of, because its rotation you can use for your ladder volume. So here it says 65,536, which is actually the same as 0. So someone's probably rotated this ladder, me, several times, or like has rotated it before and then rotated it again, and then that's why that value is 65,000, whatever it was, and it's the same as 0, so it doesn't really matter. I mean, I can come in here and change that. It's not going to hurt anything, but that's you can basically copy this, the rotation of that static, and go in here and paste it. So, for example, I'm going to duplicate this ladder, and I'm going to rotate it at a bizarre angle, or like at a very unique angle. Now, it doesn't update the properties dialog right away, so as you can see, it's 3,840. So if I say duplicated this ladder volume, moved it over here, also rotated it in a bizarre fashion, you can see that it doesn't actually rotate, because it's still the same. I changed this one to negative 16,384. You can see it's not the same. So, or I mean, it's still the same. So it doesn't actually update when you rotate the volume. So let's go in here and get the rotation, which was 3,840, and I come in here, and you can see the angle that it's rotated right here. It's an arrow upwards. There it is. You can see it in the perspective viewport as well. So I'm just going to come down here and paste this, and oops, I'm doing that in the wrong spot. Ladder volume, and come in here and paste this, and then now it's actually pointing towards the ladder, as you can see. So then this ladder would actually be usable if I built, but I don't want to. And that's pretty much how I set up ladders these days. Every ladder is a little bit different. One of the things I like to do when I'm working on ladders, because I'll spend a good like hour or two perfecting a ladder to make sure it is very consistent, so I or a player can climb up and down a church tower many times without ever accidentally falling or killing themselves in some bizarre fashion. So I'm not going to save. I'm going to open up Po2 because that's another map I spent hours on working on the ladders, and I'm still not done. There's a lot of ladders in that map. Um, let's go over here to the church. It's just faster to just move the camera. Okay, so you can't see, there's a ladder at the top here. There's two ladders coming up in the side tower, and you can see the arrows pointing towards. Now this church is rotated, so where am I at? You can see that it's rotated, and the rotation is 12,288. Oops. And the wall direction is 12,000. So you can see I've already kind of done that for this map, because what I did was I actually had this church on a 90 degrees while I worked on it, because it's so much easier to work on a building. Well, actually, it's pretty much impossible to work on a building when it's rotated like this. So you have to unrotate it while you're working on it, and then once I was done, I rotated it back to where it kind of was, and then because I didn't have it exactly, but that's okay. And then I went in here and updated the wall directions for each ladder, and then I was pretty much done. But anyways, the ladder climbing on this map is very consistent now. Like, I can climb up and down over and over and over again without ever falling. But you can see it doesn't go past the edges of the static. It doesn't allow strafing, and that's about it for creating ladders. All right.